Hello, everyone. Welcome to a glorious sunny Wednesday over here. We are just going to give it a couple of seconds. I know it takes a little while for you folks to log in, transition over. But if this is your first time joining us, hello, my name is Sadie Uribe, and I'm the media producer for the Los Angeles Regional SBDC. The SBDC is a national program with over 1,000 locations across the country, helping to stimulate economic growth through business advising and development. The LASBDC offers no cost services through funding provided by the U.S. Small Business Administration, SBA, and from the California Office of the Small Business Advocate. It's your tax dollars at work. The Los Angeles Regional SBDC network operates 7 service locations throughout Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. Our services are also offered virtually. We are here to help. We empower small business owners by offering tailored solutions through personalized one on one business advising, cutting edge workshops, and comprehensive programs, all provided at no cost. We are dedicating to supporting your entrepreneurial journey every step of the way. Lori, I'm excited for our show today on many levels, but I think I'm so excited because we are bringing someone new into our world of digital sharing, digital storytelling. So I know we're going to have an amazing show today.
We sure are. And I have to say, I keep talking about the weather lately. I don't know why, but I just feel the change in the season. I feel like fall's coming here. And I always growing up north with the leaves changing and all, I've always had this feeling like fall is a preparing to hibernate and also to reflect and see what new things will be launched in the springtime. So that's my discussion on the weather and fall today, which is going to continue, of course, within Lori's Corner. So, upcoming webinars, I had to quickly update my list because I didn't realize that we're near the end of September and the fall conversation. So, here's what I have going on in October as far as webinars, maybe bringing the cash flow back, not sure at this point in time. So, if you have any questions on a webinar that you don't see coming up, because I have taken some off the list, you know how to reach out to me personally and talk about it. Now, next week, we got a fascinating lineup in October. I've only shown the first 3 weeks, but we're all over the board, which is what I love. So, next week, we have Brad coming on from QB Cure, which is a QuickBooks consulting firm. And I think it's going to be really interesting because those frequent flyers that know I'm always wanting to talk about QuickBooks, what it will do automatically for you and what it won't, keep the human in the loop. Brad was a referral to me, and I had a conversation with him. He's QuickBooks certified. And first of all, I wanted to make sure you don't believe that you just hook up the computer and it does it all for you. And he's like, no, contrary to that. So I think it's going to be a great conversation. I'm going to talk about things that he sees within people using QuickBooks that perhaps create issues. And who knows what we'll learn, especially those who haven't used it yet, if you want to, and those are using it, things to be aware of. I got tons of referrals that have come to me from the guests we got coming up. So Simon is another referral from Emma Green. Emma, shout out to you. Thank you for the referral. And he is a personal coach that Emma has talked about a lot. And I reached out and said, who is this person you keep talking about? We need to have him on the show. So that's the origin of Simon, and he's going to talk about his wealth and wellness program. And then John Gaines has not been on the show for I don't even know how long. His company, Moving Minds, people have asked him to come back on and tell his story and talk more about what's happening. So that will be fascinating as well. Okay, Lori's Corner. You ready? I'm all over the board today. I sat there and thought so many times, what do I want to talk about today? And I have had so many challenging conversations since last week when we talked. And they've been challenging because they're the typical situation where I'm having to inform somebody who just signed a lease, well, no, the financials didn't line up. You really, are extending yourself more than makes sense to do so. No, you're not charging high enough. You're not going to be able to sell yourself out of this, all this kind of stuff, right? And it's always, as you know, so sad for me to see you guys, the entrepreneurs out there, just trying to run faster and faster and faster. But I know that you're not getting anywhere because the numbers are just not adding up. So I was going through a bunch of different things. I love, Confucius says, I mean, who doesn't want to at some point be on some kind of public thing and say, Confucius says, it makes you sound so wise just even saying that. But I went upon an old quote from Confucius that says, "It does not matter how slowly you go as long as you do not stop." Now, I can't say exactly what he was referring to when he wrote the quote, but I'm going to give you my interpretation from my business perspective on it. And of course, do not stop. People are going to think go bankrupt, etc. I'm thinking more along the lines of, do not stop. Do not stop from seeing yourself as an entrepreneur, maybe switching out the product line, maybe shutting down the company and, becoming an employee for a little bit and gaining information and then trying it again. The fact of the matter is, I think too many people are sold this belief that they need to start the company and then be all over, be international, be whatever, grow it to this amount, bring on employees, and they're trying to do these things so fast that isn't even logical, and it's not actually traditionally. There's no trajectory to show that that's how companies typically grow, right? Typically they just kind of are a little bit of a turtle pace, and they put a strong foundation in at each step. And so I've said this many times before, that we have to get back to this concept that small companies can become large if they desire to do so, but nevertheless they're built really one little brick at a time. So, Lori Williams, the importance of understanding enough. And this is something I had been thinking about, and I'm going to tell a little story. It goes back to me teaching in the entrepreneurial division in one of the major universities. When I would start out my class, I knew I was in a trajectory of several classes that they had prior to me, where a lot of the professors were telling them that all you need is passion. And if you got passion, you can create this, da da da, all that stuff, right? So I had to kind of retrain them, get them in a new mindset from the minute they got in my class, because my class was about finance, going through profitability, forecasting, right? So I knew this would happen. Day one, I would always say to everybody, so what does it take to succeed as an entrepreneur or a company, right? And they were so eager, they'd all raise their hand and they'd scream out, passion. And I go, no, customers, no, and they would like just exhaust themselves trying to figure out the answer. And when I got them tired enough to pay attention to me, the first thing I say is, do you know what passion does? Passion gets you out of bed in the morning. That's all it does. It doesn't grow a successful company. What grows a successful company is around the word enough. Not as in, I've had enough, I'm done, but you have to have enough, right? And my response was, you have to have enough customers paying high enough of a price, selling price, to cover the overhead for production, to cover the overhead expenses, and to have enough left over to pay you back and be able to reinvest in the company. That is what defines a successful company. No matter where we go with technology, AI, or what, as long as we're in what I call the 3D monopoly game, some things will always be true. If you're not bringing in more money than going out the door with enough left over, you don't have a successful business. If you see the fact that you can have continuity by continuing to find something that is, and it's not wherever you are today has to be the end all. Life goes on and we can continue to find different things to do, but enough will always play its part. So that's my talk for today. And it kind of, if you will, in a way leads into the guest today. I'm so excited to have Lynn on. I love this beginning. She almost didn't want me to put it in when she first wrote it, but I think it's a beautiful beginning. At a young age of 70, which I don't even see that, but okay, Lynn is beginning a new chapter, leaving behind more than 30 years in the corporate world to follow her calling as a Reiki healer. Abundant Energy is committed to supporting its clients in achieving the energy and clarity we all need to flourish. Lynn, welcome, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Lori. I appreciate you inviting me on.
I've been saying this a lot. It's always great to have intellect, intelligence, knowledge is power. I'm a firm believer in that. I never have changed my opinion on that. But I've been more, I'm going to say the word obsessed with the importance of wisdom. I think that we are, I got a feeling that you resonate with that a little bit. I think we're starting to run around too much obsessed with knowledge and intellect and intelligence at the expense of not incorporating wisdom. And that's really what I was talking about in my corner. Now, I typically start out by delving immediately into your background and tell me about it. But I'm going to start out by talking about, for just 1 second, any thoughts you have on my obsession with wisdom, and from your years of being an entrepreneur and being in entrepreneur circles, wisdom's part or any part that you think that helps entrepreneurs today.
Well, that's a big
I know.
topic.
Yep. I'm just going to make you start out with just a couple comments.
Dive in the deep end.
We're going to play off it. We're going to keep going.
Yes. Well, I think, for me personally, the challenge with wisdom is, a lot of people go through life second guessing themselves. And so you have to get outside of that and look at the grander scheme of things and where you've been and what you've accomplished as a person throughout your life. And it not only involves your business, but your personal life as well. And then you have to subtract out all the distractions we have now with, the Instagram and the everything coming at you all at once that says what you're supposed to be doing. And if you're not doing it, there's something wrong with you.
Something wrong with
For me personally, it took a lot of work calming my mind, quieting my mind, and kind of being able to rake through everything that was coming at me, and even throughout all my years, and trying to coalesce it into something that is meaningful and helped me move forward through this transition that I'm going through now, which has been interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're going to go back and start from the beginning. I'm going to make one more comment before I leave this thought. I think for us included in this, who are older, we got an ability to kind of work on ourselves a bit, of quiet our mind and knowing what to listen to. And then we had the age where you naturally do get a little bit more confidence before we got thrust into this noisy world we live in, right? And to those that are, 10, 20, 30 years younger, which is a lot of the people listening to us today, they're having to develop some skills rather quickly or drowned in it. And that's why I wanted to bring that up. But I want to go back to, so you spent decades leading your family's medical device company. I'm going to keep reading this because this is pretty interesting. You grew it to a global enterprise, traveled the world, and explored different cultures. I want to stop and go a little bit back, because when anybody says that they were involved in the family business, they either were, okay, I wanted to do this since I was a kid, I went to school for it, I was so excited, and then I went in the family business, or I really thought I was going to do this is what, but then I was in the family business. So tell us about the pre-family business and the family business, and just entering it.
Happy to. So I'm part of the latter example. I actually had a 10-year career in public television before I went to work for my father.
Really? What were you doing in public television?
So when I was in college, I got involved in the theater department, and I was in the behind the scenes, building sets and doing props and makeup. And after college, I got a job at our local public television station, which actually had a lot of federal funding. And this was back in the day when everything was on TV. Like, we did a lot of GED programming. So we would bring actors in, and we would do programming around math, history, reading. And I started out doing makeup and set decoration, and then became an associate producer. And then when my last few years there, I was a producer, and got to be involved in a lot of interesting production. And so it was interesting, but I also got to a point where I was a little stagnated in my position there. And that was the time when my father approached me to see if I wanted to come work in his business. And he started he was an IBM engineer. That was his whole career. And he had a neurosurgeon friend who said, I don't like these headlights we wear in surgery. They're so uncomfortable. And, it was cocktail napkin drawing, and they drew a picture, and he built one, a couple of them, took them to a show, a trade show, and got some orders. And my brothers and I built them in the basement of our house. And that was way, way back, like in the, my high school years. So back in the
Wow.
70s. And then he retired early from IBM, and he and my mother just put everything in the back of the station wagon and drove to the trade shows around the country, and kind of built it from the ground up. And when he asked me to join, I took a leave of absence from my job and worked in the business for a little bit. And when I saw that he wanted me to build like the international distribution first, and I thought, well, that'd be really cool, to work with people around the world. And
Wow.
mind you, this was the days of fax machines and
Yeah.
pay telephones, and just back in the ice age almost. Um so I you know left my public television days behind and went to work for my dad. And
You know what's
um,
really interesting, Lynn? And I knew you were going to be fascinated. I knew there was a story behind a story behind the story. I just knew it because we've talked many times, but I had no idea about all this. But when you speak about building in the basement, putting it in the car, driving around the trade shows back at that point in time, that was what you did because, like you said, that was what was available. You didn't go on the internet, you didn't all do all this. But
yeah.
it's interesting because I was kind of pulled to my Lori's corner suddenly. I was going to do one thing and I suddenly went in a different direction. But now I see how it intertwines with our dialogue right now. Because really what I was saying is, although the methods may have changed, the simplicity of just taking it step by step. Now I got an idea. Now it's on a napkin, say it's on a cab, but now it's on a napkin. Now it's actually built to some degree of understanding what it is. Now we go and just drive around and display it in a trade show where we get more people to know about it. Now we get our daughter to come. I don't think, although the methods of delivery, the internet, et cetera, has changed, the main mechanisms of the slow go, get feedback, and grow a company has changed back from, as you just pointed out, the ice age.
Mhm. Yes, my father was very methodical, and he actually, while he was at IBM, he took an MBA. He got his MBA in business, and he learned,
Yeah,
from the
fascinating.
ground up. Yeah.
So you were pretty young at this point, joining and being able to go internationally and do this. So I'm assuming that you kind of got thrust into the business corporate world at a very young age without actually having been around the culture of it a lot, or would I be incorrect in that?
No, you're correct. The world I was in public television it was a lot of fun. It was, you know, a group of people, doing television production. And then, it was just a lot looser and more flexible. And this was a little more structured.
Right, right.
And so a little bit different. My father was a very good mentor. He, it was wonderful having him, help me learn. And I just started at the front desk answering the phones. And then I started working with distributors, and we started with 3 international distributors when I first started. There were 2 in Canada and 1 in Italy, and then
Oh,
and 1 in France. Sorry, there
oh,
were
you had to
4.
travel to terrible places there,
Oh,
really.
it was awful. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. What was that like, all of a sudden, because I can't imagine all of a sudden you're having conversations internationally with distribution companies on a medical device. It seems like it was just such a night and day experience. Were there concerns? Did you have any issues of not having the confidence at that point to project it? And I ask that, Lynn, because so many of our entrepreneurs, are forced without considering this fact that they're going to be the salesperson for their company. And suddenly they're having to be put in this position of communicating that they never had to before. And it sounds like you were absolutely put in that position and had to learn how to overcome any concerns you had about not being able to represent yourself in that fashion. So anywhere you want to go on that.
Yeah, it took me a while to gain the confidence in how to talk, I guess, business with, distributors and people out there, and um, get the get the language right. And I always wanted to help them as opposed to asking them how they were going to help me, because, they had a really nice product to sell, and, it was up to me to make sure they did it. And so I had to kind of get that mindset going and how to communicate well with them. And it took me a little while because I was always a bit shy, but I had really good people skills. Like, I related well to people. So I felt comfortable around them, even though my shyness was coming from more, I want you to do this for me, instead of how can I help you? And, you know, that
Interesting.
direction. Yeah.
Just as a touching on one things that you wrote in here, and I thought was interesting into the connection. So we talked about the fact that you were traveling the world and exploring different cultures, and then you said it sparked your curiosity about energy, wellness, and the human experience. So this is a really interesting launch into a topic that wouldn't have been on the studio set, and I wouldn't have seen in the medical device company somebody saying, well, in this experience, I started thinking about energy. What happened? How did this bridge get connected?
I believe for me, it was the ability to connect with people from all over the world. So after a while, I had the fabulous opportunity to travel to places like India, China, Japan, South America, Europe, Scandinavia, and Australia. I've been just
Wow, you
all
have
over the
been
place.
everywhere. Yes.
And I was there kind of as their guest, because I was there to train their teams, and they showed me parts of the cities that maybe a tourist wouldn't see, or I got to see it in a way that other people might not ordinarily get to, and relate to people in a different way as well. I was taken to really cool restaurants, and tourist sites as well, but with a guide that was from that city that was there for me. So it was an interesting way to connect to people, and open my eyes to just the global connectivity of people. Everybody's out there doing their thing. The people in my world, the people that sold my products, the people I worked with, that was their focus. And I thought it was the coolest thing how we could, I could connect with someone in India,
Yeah.
and deal with them kind of on this level, and with, my product in mind, and their well-being. I wanted them to succeed as well.
Yeah, especially at a time period where we didn't have the internet exposure like we do today. I can remember, and I don't even know why. I've had so many, bizarre thoughts when I was a kid that, why was I even thinking of this? But I grew up, like many people know, in this really small country town. There was nothing. I mean, I didn't even have a street light, Lynn. So I didn't know traffic lights. I didn't know anything outside the world. And, we were told don't sit in front of my mother called it the boob tube for some reason, don't sit in front of the TV, get out and play in the woods. So that was my upbringing, right? But I would lay on the grass under this tree, and I was always enamored by this thought that here I am laying in the grass under the tree, and all these people are running around this big globe doing all these different things at the very same time, and they're having different experiences. So I can imagine then being exposed to it. That thought, that memory came back to me as you were speaking of it. And another memory that came back is that I spent some time in Ecuador in South America when I was climbing. I was, many people here know I was a big high altitude and rock climber. And I got to know the climbing guides, the Ecuadorian guides down there, and they took me to a lot of the sacred spots that gringos, as we were called, wouldn't have gone to. And I also was down deep into Mexico, remember seeing people that had oxen and carts, and I remember at that moment thinking that although the world seems so big and we seem so different, at the end of the day, we are really so similar.
Mm.
It's like the more your eyes open, you go through, or at least I'll let you comment it, almost as a whiplash for me. It was like going from the country to whiplashed over, oh my God, there's so many different things and there's all this difference and all this, and then all of a sudden a whiplash back. Oh no, they care about the same things. And I've heard this said so many times and I think about it a lot, especially when there's different points of view on things. At the end of the day, we all want the same. We all
Mhm.
want the same. So as you were noticing about the differences, does any of what I'm saying I'm feeling like something came away because you mentioned the energy and you mentioned wellness and the human experience. So when you saw the differences, was it the similarities that you saw as well?
It was that, and it was how you relate, because there are a lot, like you said, a lot of similarities and a lot of differences. And when I first started traveling internationally, my father gave me a book called Kiss, Bow, and Shake Hands.
Really? I never heard
And
that one.
it's amazing. It's like a cookbook for travel. So
Okay.
you're going to Brazil, and so you go to Brazil, or sometimes she breaks it down into cities, and it tells you the business culture there, like especially between men and women, and traveling a
Yeah.
lot of times alone as a woman. It's important to be aware of these things, and it tells you, what signals not to do. Like everybody's okay with, oh, everything's fine, well, you don't do this when you're in Brazil, because it's an insult, or, I can't remember if that's it exactly, but and Japan especially.
Oh, yes.
Oh my gosh, the culture there. I loved it. I mean, I love learning about how to interact, and it puts you more on a level, because, people also have certain um, ideas in their mind about Americans and what we're
Right.
like. And
I was
so
just thinking that.
so I tried really hard to be respectful of their culture and communicate them in a way that I felt would be, you know, um, on par with, that would respect that culture,
Right.
basically. And it was a challenge to me, and I really enjoyed it. And that, I think that helped me open up some of the intuitive connectedness that I feel with, this sounds weird, but with the world, or, um, with the people. And because you have to kind of open up a door, break down a door, let in some kind of a connection with them, so you can communicate on an equal level with them, or on their level, in a way that shows that you respect and understand them. And you know
Yeah, and don't be concerned about saying anything that sounds weird. We're into the woo. I mean,
good.
Reiki healer on here. So we got a Reiki healer and we're only going to talk about those things you can actually touch. And no, that doesn't even make logical sense here, Lynn. That doesn't make logical sense. But and what you're saying too, and where I'm starting to think more, and I've been thinking in line with business as well, is that I think as the MBA schools, I'm just going to say the MBA schools, I'm just going to use that as an analogy. They teach the entrepreneurs, you need to know your market share, you need to know all this. They get so far removed away from the individual human connection when not only do I always say that in the small businesses, especially now where I see the most money being made, is the solopreneurs like yourself. They could be
Mhm.
doing consulting, they could be doing Reiki healing, they could be doing anything, but the people that are really making money are the ones without the overhead, right? That's who's really making the money these days. But the difference, and I was thinking about this just this week, is that they're really looking at the individual and saying, what is my offering specific to this individual and how do I communicate with them? And I think back in the day, even though we did think about market share, we still thought about selling to the individual, whether the individual was the distributor that you're communicating with in another
Mhm.
country or the individual was the customer that's actually buying from you. I sometimes think we have dehumanized our customers to the point that we're not really syncing with them and connecting with them to a degree that we can get past the barriers of differences to even explain what we do and attract more customers. Now, that was all over the place. And I think even hearing myself, it was a little bit all over the place. But does that resonate? Does it make any sense? Do you find some words to add to what I said?
Yeah, no, it makes total sense to me. And so what happened in 2010, I actually um, separated from my father's company. I had, some brothers in the business, and we parted ways, and I took my company, BFW, on to, another level where we became a manufacturer for a little while, whereas initially we were a distributor. And we introduced a new lamp technology. We didn't develop the technology, but we introduced it into our product, and we won an award that resulted in a $90,000 grant. And I mean, it was really an interesting adventure. And I realized at the time I needed to bring people on that would help me, in other aspects of my business. So I did have someone working with me. I hired him about 7 years ago that kept an eye on the you know the market shares and where we could look for business and all. And I let him handle that, and feed me that information. But I was, more comfortable in the person to person, and kind of overseeing everything on a more holistic viewpoint. So I brought people in that did the things I couldn't do, and I did what I did best.
See, and I knew because I knew we had a conversation when we first met about you selling your company. And then I was thinking that was not your father's company. So you then left your father's company and started your own company, kind of in the same world, but not. Um, See, that's why I said you've had amazing journey. And so is the company, and I'm going to back up and I'm going to go through this just so I get it. The company you recently sold then was your company that you
Mhm.
started out. Okay, I just wanted to
Yes.
make sure I get things on the right time frame. But I didn't want to go there without leaving something you said, where you talked about the fact that you hired somebody in to identify the market share and all that, but you still remained the point of contact on the connections to the relationships that allowed the company to grow, whatever they may be, a customer, a distributor, etc. And
Mhm.
I like what you said because it gave me some more clarity. I think what was thinking about is the understanding your marketplace, understanding whatever words we want to use, the value proposition and all that gives you an idea about where to go. Like, okay, and out of all these roads, this is where I want to point this direction versus that direction. But at the end of the day, it's still an interconnection with individuals that grows the company. I think that's where we got lost. The market share concept, the value proposition got identified as the actual connection, and the connection of communication is what changed. And it's interesting because I was thinking about another thing today. I've had, like I said, a hard week with so many people having difficulties within their company. And I even realized that I always want to, put my sleeves up and I want to go, okay, give me your numbers, give me your numbers. Let me see the spreadsheets. What are we going to do? Because I'm wanting to right away identify the problem. It's like a triage emotion for me.
Mhm.
Ship's going down, mayday, mayday. Let's figure out the holes. That's my mindset, right? Because that's where I'm going to. And I have come to know that I have to first even explain to the people and relate to them to say, first of all, we're looking for a problem. This is why, but if we find it, it'll be okay and we'll figure it out. I had to change my approach where half of my time, especially the first calls, were more in communication and connection rather
Mhm.
than let me just delve in. And it was partly from my private business being a consultant, being hired by bigger firms. If I came and had a conversation, they'd be like, where's the spreadsheets, right? But it really does remind me of the need to connect on every level. And what I think is really interesting about that is that I was thinking about how fear, we talk about fear stopping us from doing things, but I'm starting to look at how fear keeps us doing what we shouldn't be doing as well. It's
Oh,
you know what
definitely.
I mean? And
Yeah.
I'm starting to think that we are focusing too much on fear stopping us from grabbing at something where we
Mhm.
need to start looking also where is fear stopping us from letting go? Because even our story up to now, and we're starting to go into the where you went next, you had to let go of the studio, let go of your father's company, let go of your company then. And so many people would have just stayed and rode where they're comfortable because they didn't want to let go. Any thoughts or comments on even to the energetic um, part of us that if fear is the kryptonite too? I like saying it that way.
Yeah, letting go is it's a challenge. And each door I went through was hard. And I don't really remember exactly what went through my mind when I was walking through each door or making each change, but that it was something that needed to be done. And um, you just have to put one foot in front of the other and keep going. And that's kind of got me through a lot of tough spots
Yeah,
in my
absolutely.
life.
I've always had this adventuresome spirit, so I've always been like, "Oh, what am I going to do next? What am I going to where am I going to go?" So, how long did you have your company? How long was that in business?
So BFW, I separated from the original company in 2010,
Okay.
and then 2023 is when it was
You had
sold.
it for a long period of time. Comment a little bit on, we don't have to get into the weeds on this, but people love to hear about and they're starting here and I have people say to me all the time, well, I'm going to start this company and then I'm going to sell it off. I'm like, start the company, like, you need to have it grow before, but they've once again been conditioned by social media that they need to think about the exit strategy before they even got into the entrance. I'm like, well, you don't even have anything anybody would buy. But when you go to sell a company and your experience with selling a company, I'll let you go through the main points of it, but what I always tell people, it's a little bit more challenging and more involved and more engaging than you think, unless you got somebody that is a longtime friend or an employee. That even has its kind of challenges, but it's not like, okay, people just knocking down the door and everybody's going to buy it and it's going to happen in a month. Give us just an overview of the complexities of selling a company.
Okay. Yeah, that it is a very big topic.
Yeah.
However, I really never had it in my mind about selling it. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. The fact that I'm 70 now, in my mind, I'm 45. I don't
I
know.
know
I
you
just,
are too. You are.
yeah.
You absolutely
And
are.
I was just going to keep on going. And, I enjoyed it. I love the travel, and I liked the business part of it. COVID was a real challenge, especially in the medical field.
Oh, yeah.
Was it was and I feel for the hospitals. I mean, they're having challenges now because they don't know what's going to happen with their reimbursements and what kind of funding they're going to have coming in. But I think it was very fortunate that so when I told you we started out with 3 international distributors, one was in Canada. That's the company that approached me to purchase my company. He knew my father, he knew my business, he knew the trajectory of the company. He grew his company from just being based in in British Columbia, and then grew it all the way across the country, and has done a wonderful job growing his business. And then he approached me, and it took me almost a year to decide if it's what I wanted to do. And then the negotiations were challenging, and
It goes,
you know,
people don't realize the importance of financial data. And I mean, like accurate
yes,
records and tax returns is what I'm speaking of specifically, because
yes,
all the times when I go through a small company, trying to, whether they are buying something on a commission, referral, or selling the company outright, suddenly all the documents that were not in order become evident. It sounds like
yeah,
exactly what I'm talking about. Words of wisdom to people about the type and the intensity of documents that get transferred,
oh,
kind of
yeah.
discussions. They're huge, aren't they, Lynn?
Yes, and I was very fortunate, again, hire people that know what you don't, and I had a wonderful CFO, and he cared about my company. Everybody that I hired, my team was amazing. I had wonderful people. I had a team of 6, and everybody that worked with me really cared about the company, and we got along well as friends, and which was really important to me. So he, my CFO had, everything was there. It was, if it was me having to do all that and then having to pull all that together, it would have been a nightmare. I probably would be in so much tax trouble, it'd be crazy. So I knew enough about myself not to manage that part of it
Yeah, I've been involved
personally.
from a CFO and a financial perspective, and it is a headache and a nightmare even when you
Yeah.
know what's happening.
Hmm.
It's much more intense than people realize. That's why a lot of times I tell people, you never know what's going to happen in the future. So having your numbers and your documents and using software that's not temporarily free and you can't access it later, these are decisions
Yeah.
companies make that isn't a good decision at all.
Yeah.
So as you sold the company in 23, I know you then moved to Santa Monica. So you made some major changes, and I'm sure I'm jumping through some things to fill in the blank. How did you, and let's just go there. How did you go from selling your medical device company to moving, and I'm not even probably putting in the right order, but moving to Santa Monica, deciding to be a Reiki healer? This is like, okay, everything was kind of a jump, but okay, dad had the company. Okay, you went off now you're like, okay, I'm going a completely different direction. And at what I love to say, an age where it shows us that we are always young and alive if we choose to
Hmm.
be and can always experience new things. So start walking us through how all this happened.
Yes, let's see if I can get it all straight in my mind. So I was back and forth to Santa Monica because I really love it here, and I had a good friend that lived here. I house sat for her, and I spent some time here during COVID, which was the time I got certified in level 1 and 2, Reiki level 1 and level 2. And it was an online course, and it really affected me. And I found Reiki kind of through listening to podcasts and getting,
And you'll have to explain to the audience what Reiki is, because there's going to be some
okay.
people that don't know. So we really need to stop and really say, what is Reiki, and go into as much that you need to so people can understand what we're even talking about.
So Reiki is a Japanese art or process called it means universal life force energy. And as a Reiki practitioner, you become what they call attuned to channel energy, and we are all energy. Everything is energy, and everything is connected, and that is the belief. And if you are around people and you feel this buzz of excitement or a buzz of anxiety, that's energy, that's feeding you. And so to learn to read those and to learn this process, the practice actually brings Reiki through the practitioner and into the client. And it creates an energetic alignment. It's very relaxing, but also can be energizing. It's very healing. Um, and for me, I think it's just a wonderful way for me personally to connect to humans and to help them feel better. And I really enjoy it. And I think it's something that's been kind of bubbling underneath my surface, and what's helped me connect with people throughout my business life as well.
Did
S-
you get exposed to Reiki in Japan, being it of Japanese? I wonder if there's a connection.
No,
Ah,
I
interesting.
never did. However, the mental control that they practice there, just even in their everyday life, is really interesting. And I started even before COVID. I started meditating and um, kind of focusing on how I was going to get to Santa Monica, because I just, when I would visit my friend, I really felt pulled to be here. So I did a lot of, manifesting and all of that kind of woo woo stuff, but I don't think it's woo woo. I think you put it out there in the energy, to the energy, and it comes back to you. And that's why I've started being very careful about like how I talk to myself and what I say. And um, because, it's heard, it goes somewhere, and it's heard. So um, let's see, we were talking about back and forth to Santa Monica
Yep.
and the
And
Reiki
so
practice. Yep.
and I want to come on something you said before we go there is that I think it's interesting and it could be my perspective. So, they can tell Sadie in the chat if they anybody relates to what I'm saying or says it's no, Lori, it's just the world you're hanging in. I think we used to use the word woohoo a lot, because we were like, okay, I'm going to talk about something nobody wants to hear about, nobody wants to talk about, and I'm going to say it and you're going to say I'm crazy. I still think that exists, obviously, but over the last 30, 40 years, saying things like acupuncture at one time were considered woo-woo. I don't
Yeah.
think acupuncture is in general terms at all anymore. And Reiki, a lot of people know what Reiki is, some people don't. But I think that on some level, humanity in general is becoming more aware that, hey, maybe I am something more than just people call it the meat suit sometimes, or the
Yeah.
what have you, right? I don't know what
Right. Yeah.
where it's like when you say something like, I sense this, people are like, okay, yeah, I felt this, I recognize this. And so I know what you're saying. Actually heard somebody say that the term now is the new woo, because the old woo was you didn't talk, the new woo is a different woo, right?
Or
I don't know
true woo, or
the
woo
true
true.
the new true woo, so I don't think that being woo woo is so much as it used to be, especially when we start talking about just our inherent sensitivities to our environment and energy. Maybe, if we start talking about some things that are, okay, I just channeled, so that can be still considered woo. But when we're just talking about really the fact of acknowledging our internal energies within us and the fact that we're interacting with the world and ourselves in some way more than we've talked about a lot, I think
Mhm.
people are getting more comfortable with that. You were about to say something.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say is when I started meditating, it was way before, the whole sale of my company came about, and, before my move and pre-COVID and everything. And I honestly believe that, it made me not a whole different person, but the person that I was meant to be. I, it calmed me down internally. It calmed my brain down. I wasn't like spiraling out, which I could do sometimes. I wasn't freaking out about things. I was able to more calmly assess situations, and was able to sit quietly, and solutions would come.
Yeah.
And it really helped me in my business world. And that's the other aspect of my new business that I want to look at, is how to incorporate this practice into helping people in the business world, you know
Yep. Yeah.
tone
And
it, yeah, calm it down a bit, and open up, and let let the message come in, and it will come. Yeah.
yeah. And I didn't want to interrupt you at all on that, Lynn. I think what you just said, if there was one key takeaway in my personal perspective, I'm going to say my personal perspective is of such great importance. I've been meditating for eons. I don't even know when I did it. And I think I started meditating as a kid under the tree. I think it was just
Yeah.
natural attraction I had. And really, my objective was to get the inner voice to just shut the hell up. That's how I felt. Just shut the hell up.
Yes.
Because it was just like, you need to do this and you're not successful and you're not, all these things, right? And I would
Yeah.
just pour me down. And I was like, can
Hmm.
you just stop for a little bit? So that was my main goal. But over years, what I definitely came to know is the information is in the silence, not in the talk, not in the chatter. And
Hmm.
from a business perspective, anything in life, we're looking for the wisdom of what we're not seeing, what we're not observing, what we're not noticing. That's why we go to other people to get a perspective. What do you see that I don't? So when
Hmm.
we tap into this inner knowing, it doesn't matter what you believe it comes from. That does not matter, whether it's an inner knowing or you just were too busy to pay attention. It was always there. I don't think it really matters. I always look at it like I don't really care where the message is being delivered from or to whom. I look at the value of the message and how does it relate to how I feel internally. And I have been on this kick, especially the last 4 years, where I started with this, what do we know to be true? What do I know to be true in my business? What do I know to be true in the world? What do I know to be true in anything that the world is saying? And I just came to this conclusion that the truth is always within me. And if I could get this little bit of this sense within myself where I could take any new concept, any new idea, and I could like lay it next to it and say, test it, like a little, like it's got this little crystal in me that says, okay, I'm going to put this idea, this thought next to me, and you'd give me a little ding or so to give me a feeling if it
Yeah.
makes sense to
Let's,
me. And I
mhm.
think that is the power of business wisdom as well. And I think that you have to get to a point where you shut off everything else you're hearing and say, does this business idea make sense? And so
Mhm.
I agree with what you're saying. Please add anything on to what I just rambled. I'm rambling today.
You're not rambling, you're actually speaking my language. So no, it makes a lot of sense. And what you said is a different aspect of, energy testing or muscle testing, which is, ask a question and, you know, pull on your fingers. And if it's, right, they won't come apart. If it's wrong, they come apart. There are all sorts of, ways that you can, and it's your body knowing. I mean, but it's trusting your body that's the challenge. It's trusting yourself that's the biggest challenge. So once you've, as because you've experienced it for so long, once you learn to trust, how you feel when things are right, it gets a little bit easier and a little less frantic.
It really does. And I find this interesting because it happens nonstop every day, every week with my consulting, whether they're in a webinar or a one-on-one. This is what happens. I have people say they want to come to me for me to look at the numbers or teach them to look at their numbers to get a feel of how they're doing in their company. That part wouldn't surprise anybody that I said that, right? But this is the part I want to say either at the beginning or after they have a conversation with me, they always say this to me. I had a sense that something was not right.
Yep.
I had this coach saying, you're doing good at it. This is great. All these people saying it, but I had a sense something was not right. And I've always heard those words. And I realized that if they slowed down and paid attention to that sense, they would have asked some fundamental questions sooner, which would have
Hmm.
saved them from many of the mistakes if we want to talk about specifically business. So I think it's that sense that if you're not even noticing or you're overriding, that keeps you from getting information that could really help to make you achieve goals, personal or professional. Your thought?
Right. And it's that time of quiet, if it's 3 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes a day, that helps connect with that sense and
Now,
get, yeah.
yeah. Before we end, I wanted to make sure I brought this up too, because I think so now we're talking this way. We're going to flop it and we're going to go over here if I can make my hands do that. So our reason for speaking was because you were needing to make sure you had everything set up properly in California and the company set up and closing out the company you had and all of the legal requirements and regulation requirements to set up the company properly. And not that we need to delve in any details, but my message out there, because I'm always telling the entrepreneurs they have to be very clear and know the government regulations, and they aren't necessarily intuitive or a sense because they're
Oh, yes.
laws or rules that you would not expect. And that's what happened. We had this conversation. I was like, no, Lynn, you got to do this. And so here you are wanting to do this very simple in many ways business model. You're a Reiki healer, you got your certification, you want to have an office to meet some people. Sounds simple enough. Just express what you learned about how you have so many forms and documents that you have to fill out. So there's the 3D monopoly world, as I call it, that we have to also pay attention to. So just a few comments on that, Lynn.
Well, first, I want to thank you for all your help. And the fact that I found SBDC was just like amazing because you were, this whole organization is great. So just a little
Thank
plug from me. Yeah, I had to unwind from Kentucky because I did have the business set up where I lived before. And then I had to, set up here in Santa Monica, and there's are so many details. And I didn't want to do it on my own because I knew the minefields that I could step into if I didn't do it correctly. And I did not want to get, stuck in a tax issue or a, licensing issue or whatever. So you specifically just held my hand and guided me got me out of Kentucky and into, Santa Monica. So now I have my little business license, and, I feel very comfortable, that I'm set up.
And I learned a lot along the way too, because like I expressed, especially when it comes to business license and certificates and in the area, a lot of times, as you know, I was on the government website going, I don't know, Lynn, let me get on the Kentucky website. Let me see what has to happen here. Let me find out and we got through all those angles, but that's what I'm saying. It's not really obvious, even me who is aware of it, but I just know what to look for. But I
Yeah.
have to figure out what the rules are too, because they're very confusing, especially when you look at the different states. If you would not have known all of that.
Yeah, and the guidance that you get from a calm mind and calm body is, no, you don't want to do this by yourself. You want to find an expert to help you do it. And that's what you do. It's not, to get this guide that's going to tell you everything, download everything from the universe to tell you exactly what to do legally, but it's to guide you in the right direction to meet, the people that can help you. So
And I think that's the key, is that when you get very clear within yourself, the resources that you need to meet, the people you need to meet, the things you need to know about and be aware of, that's where they pop into your life. I think that's the big difference that it makes. And like I said, I don't try to prescribe for my own biography on any subject matter. And I'm definitely not saying everybody needs to meditate, but I am saying is that there is some kind of energy field out there that has information, and I'm not talking about AI and chat GPT, that has even more powerful, that taken the time and tech touch and base with. So let's, before we end here, just give us kind of I'll call it the marketing pitch. If somebody was to call you, what would they call you for, and what kind of experience would they have? Because some people don't even know what being within a Reiki healer would be like. So tell us about that experience.
So a Reiki experience it's very relaxing. You wear comfortable clothes, you come to the office, you lay on, mostly on your back. It depends, like if you what you need worked on. Like if you have something's wrong with your back or your leg or your knee, I can work specifically on those parts. Fully clothed, you don't have to disrobe. I put on some Zenny music if you like, put an iPad, iPad over your eyes, and it's very relaxing. And you just lay back, and it can either be hands-on, there'll be some touching or not. Each session lasts about an hour. The other thing I do is intuitive consulting too, that I can work with people and kind of connect with them on an intuitive level and help them with some, either personal or even business questions that they might have. And like, what's their next step? What can they do to go forward? And, I pull on my experience in my business world, as well as just what I feel and how it will, what method might work best with them as a person.
And that's what I love. You're seeing more and more people combine the knowledge and experience in a business setting. And no one can deny, Lynn, you have extreme knowledge in growing companies. I mean, that's the one thing we've learned at the beginning of this conversation. And then taking it to a level of such serenity and understanding within yourself and knowing how to work with your own intuitive nature. Because aside from what works logistically, financially feasible in business, it needs the person to make it happen. We think that a business is a separate entity because it's a legal separate entity, but it's the human that is creating and developing and experiencing. And so really it's a combination of what needs to happen financially, legally, et cetera, and what does the human want to do and what's their participation. So I love the combination we had in this conversation. A lot of times I pride myself on Small Biz Talk being all over and traveling different roads, but I got to say, this has been one of the longest roads of travel in so many different ways to go from such a high corporate international, well, from TV to a high corporate international to selling your company to moving to Santa Monica to opening a company and being a Reiki healer and being able to talk about being powerful within ourselves. I think that is my conclusion of this show. I don't think I could make another sentence to conclude it. All I can add to what I just said is how friggin' awesome is that? So I'll pass last words to you, Lynn. I think those are my last words.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, I had kind of a whole list of, things to say, and we didn't even get to the transition part from like what it's like to leave this business and, just kind of step off that cliff and head on to something different. But, I would just say to anybody out there, it really does help to take some time every day just to sit quietly, put your headphones on, put some nice music on, and just listen to your breathing, listen to a guided meditation. And again, it can be 30 seconds, it can be 30 minutes, it can be whatever you have time for. It really makes a difference. It'd be interesting, for people to try and see if it helps. And then go out and explore all these other new, true woo things out there that might speak to you and help you.
I think that's once again going back to words of wisdom because there's one thing I do believe we all need is a little bit more calmness within ourselves. Because if we can bring a little bit more calmness within ourselves, I thoroughly believe the world will result in some more calmness within our exterior as well.
Agree.
Well, thank you so much, Lynn. I'm going to bring Sadie back, but I just want to thank you. I mean, I know everybody in the audience can even relate to the calmness we feel just having this conversation. And I can see in the chat some thank yous. And I feel like it was just a refreshing, calm, real discussion. Look at Lynn. While Sadie comes back, just check out the chat, the ending. I love it because that's when everybody expresses how they experienced the show. And I think it was a really good walk down many different pathways to remind us that we're really cool human beings with a lot of power and skill, and we can find many cool things to do in our life, no matter how old we are. Sadie, welcome back. What do you think about all that?
I think I'm like so zen. I mean, I was so like, when we first started, and now I'm like, all right, I'm centered, I'm focused, more webinars. But you know what? I think honestly, what I really appreciated from today is the calmness to listen to what we need to do. I was like, that is a gem right there.
Yeah, yeah, that sure is. So, with that, once again, thank you, Lynn, for sharing your personal story, allowing us to talk about the truth of woo and all those things that I love talking about as well. And I think that we don't talk about our internal personal power enough. I always say take our power back, and people hear me relating it to the finances, but I think they know I mean a little bit more than just the finance. So I have to end here. We're actually over. So as always, Sadie staying behind to make sure you can get Lynn's information from the chat, and follow up with any conversations amongst yourself. I have to say goodbye, and to the frequent flyers that are here every single week, I see your names into the chat. I love it that you're here with me every single week. If you are new to the show, please join next week for Lori Williams with Small Biz Talk. Thank you, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye. Bye, Lynn.
Thank you so much.
Bye. All righty, guys. As Lori said, I'm going to be hanging out afterwards, as I always do. So let me just put some guys back in the chat for you, like I have over here, all the upcoming classes that we have. I've been putting in how to contact the SBD, Lynn, how to watch past shows. So if there's anything in the chat that you don't see really easily, just let me know and I can drop that in there, so you can have access to it. So don't worry, I'm going to be hanging out for a few. So just go ahead and click on the URLs. That'll launch them. I know it gets a little difficult, copying. Zoom is a little funky that way. So don't worry, I'm going to be here for you. I said, click away, open the browsers. And if you just need anything that you don't see, let me know. Okay, I'll be here.